maybe that's more sociably acceptable if they spent that same amount of money in a casino or on a hand of a game. Is there a dollar amount that distinguishes, okay, if you're betting this amount of money, maybe you have a problem? Or if you're losing this amount of money? I mean, because I read somewhere that people that make $10,000 or less wager and bet 6 times as much as people that make $60,000 and more, and also that the Powerball, which has multiple states participating in it, when it gets to a certain point, all of a sudden 90% of the people that are eligible and old enough to buy a ticket think that that's when they're going to win, and they actually have greater odds, I saw, of getting struck by lightning 7 times in that line waiting for that Powerball ticket.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think the dollar and the dream and all that kind of stuff, comes into play to a certain extent. But going back to your original question, Dean, about what's the dollar threshold that causes the pain, or really is the warning sign of the red flag? I think it's absolutely different for different people, and clearly you mentioned about the fact with people with lower income levels tend to bet at higher amounts because I think maybe there's more of a desperation. They see that I put a little bit in, I could get a lot out, and that could change my life. Whereas the people that are making more than $60,000 and might be making more in an upper middle class or something, they're not trying to change their life. They're doing it, I think, more recreationally, probably is my guess. They're probably doing it more for entertainment value rather than a ticket to a better life, which often, obviously, it's a ticket to a worse life if you try and play that game. There was a guy who played in the 2004 World Series of Poker, got to the final table. His name was Al Crux. He ended up coming in 6th place and doing very well. But they did a feature on him, and he was talking about, and he's a professional gambler, he plays poker for a living, and he was talking about a few years before he made that final table, how it was a whole different mindset of how he was playing, because he was playing with that week's grocery money for his family.
Wow.
And so when those chips go in the pot, and that means dinner tomorrow night, and you lose that pot, that's when you're playing it close, pretty close to the cuff on this one. And so it really depends. I mean, if you're playing with I guess discretionary money or things like that aren't gonna. But if you're starting to play with money that affects, the home, the kids, the mortgage payment or the rent payment. I mean, if those are and I talk about that a little bit in the book too, about the psychology of who's at the table. You can almost see people who are playing scared, and they become targets, candidly, because that they're afraid to lose that money and they're scared, and when they will wilt in face of raises, and you can push them around. And so it's very dangerous to play with money that you're not willing to part with.
I have some statistics, and I always like to be face-to-face with someone that can either confirm or deny, because until recently, I didn't know that gambling had the highest suicide rate amongst all addictions.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly learning new things, and what's reported and what you hear about may not necessarily be accurate. So I'm going to give you some statistics, and I want to know your opinion of them. For example, how widespread is gambling addiction in the United States? According to some sources, 2 million of U.S. adults are estimated to meet the criteria as being addicted to gambling any given year. Another 4 to 6 million would be considered addicted gamblers. That is, they don't meet the full diagnosis criteria for being completely addicted, but meet one or more of the criteria and are experiencing problems due to their gambling behavior. 2 million adults each year.
That feels about right. I'd done some research as well, and 2% of Canadians are considered to be either moderate or problem gamblers. So 2 million in the U.S. certainly doesn't seem off base, particularly when you think about 80 million people playing poker and countless other people playing lottery tickets.
Or 40,000 people playing at 11 o'clock in the morning. 40,000
people playing 11 o'clock on a Thursday morning. So I think that's true. And then I also did some checking on what sort of responsibility do countries kind of put on themselves? We talk about what's the role of the casino or the gaming enabler.
Sure, as the casino in Montreal, what responsibility do they hold in that man's death?
Right.
I mean, if he's a regular, are we crossing into, is it that far out to say if he's an addict, criminally negligent homicide?
Well, you think about it, Dean. I mean, how long ago did they start putting in those laws where if the bartender serves the drink and the guy goes out and has a drunk driving accident, who bears that responsibility? I think there's a strong parallel to those kind of questions that need to be asked. Up in Canada, the video lottery terminals are wildly popular, like the machines they have up at the Racino in Saratoga and so on. and they're wildly addictive for certain people. For me, they have no interest whatsoever.
And you could start as small, I know at the Racino in Saratoga, as 5 cents
Nickel.
or a nickel.
Yep, nickel slots.
How is someone going to become an addict, addicted to gambling from a nickel slot, John?
Well, it's funny. I mean, I think what happens is the profit margins are so razor thin on those, and you'll see these signs in Vegas, and maybe they even have them at the Racino. I have to admit, I've never been there, but you'll say 99.8% payback, which to me, I never understood why that was attractive to somebody, because that basically means you're going to whittle away at my money. But be that as it may, people put the money in, and they'll put in $1 and they'll win 95 cents, and they'll go, oh, maybe next time I'll win a little bit more. I didn't lose that much. And then maybe after they lose, a little bit, they'll say, well, if I try the quarter machines, maybe I can get it back faster. And this is where we get into that chasing your losses concept. And let's face it, these games are fun for a lot of people. They're not just simply the one-armed bandits that they used to have before, but now they're based on Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy and popular movies, and they have flashing lights, and they're very captivating in a multi-sensory way. And so I think people get caught up in the excitement and the possibilities, and they're not sitting there crunching the numbers saying, the chance of these 3 bars coming up is 1 in a gazillion, and I have to put in this many quarters to get to the next row. And they're not worried about the math behind it.
Especially if you're being fed drinks.
If you're being
also
fed drinks, you got cocktail waitresses coming around, and you got free booze, and so it all just adds up to a very addictive. And the reason I brought that up is just if you go through the math, and I'll use Canada as an example, so we don't indict ourselves here in the U.S. But last year they had $1.6 billion in income from video lottery terminals up in Canada, and they spent $27.5 million on gambling relief and gambling anonymous ads and things of that nature. So you can see what a drop in the bucket there. They're really just giving kind of lip service.
So we're negative $4 million?
Well, 1.6 billion.
Oh, I thought you said million.
1.6 billion in profit.
Wow.
27.5 million with little m. So it's over $1.5 billion on the plus side for the money going into the coffers versus, educating people so that the stuff in the Montreal casino doesn't happen as often as it does now.
So let me ask you something, John. We spoke before about legislature trying to curb it.
Yeah.
What benefit would they have curbing it, for example, if it's a state-run or a government-run? For example, lottery.
Yeah.
I always see, you go into a restaurant that has the quick draw machines, and quick draw in the New York State Lottery raised $32 million this week for education. Yeah. Why would they it's almost like they're benefiting from it, so why would, and what efforts and how far will they go to curb it? What have you seen directly as far as efforts to curb it, but we're saying stuff to save face.
Yeah, well, I think a couple things, Dean. I mean, they do have on almost every machine they've got the 1-800 number to call.
This big.
It's in small print. Yes, I agree. They could probably make the font larger. That's true. I think there are probably ways where they could actually, instead of just people pulling loose dollars out of their pockets, I think they could probably do something where you actually get accounts. And maybe once you maybe you can, just like they do online, maybe you can only put $50 in a machine a day or a week. Put some kind of limits on it so that you can help curb that a little bit. I think I think the lottery has done sort of a disservice. They do claim to fund education, but I serve on a local school board here, and very little of that's trickling through. There's big lottery buildings and people driving around in company cars and all that kind of fun stuff. So
yeah, I see all these school board votes that can't pass. Well, where's the money that the lottery's raising?
Yeah, it's not getting through to the districts, let's put it that way. So I don't know where it goes, but we haven't seen the billions at the local level, I'll guarantee you that. But I do think there's an opportunity in the online sector. I mean, first of all, the way that this bill was passed 2 years ago was just atrocious. It was introduced at 9:30 on a Friday night. Nobody had seen it before. It was voted on at midnight the following night. It was packaged under a Port Authority safety bill that had nothing to do with gambling whatsoever. And it somehow left out horse racing and lottery and some of the more popular forms of gambling and targeted poker itself.
Now, is that right here in New York State?
No, that was national.
Okay, so it's national.
So President Bush signed the bill.
It would have included New York.
It does include New York. Yep, absolutely. And so the legislative proposals that are being advanced now are more about regulating this $20 billion online poker industry. So that the government gets a piece of the action, which makes a lot of sense. Right now, it all basically is tax-free. B, I think it also can be targeted towards education or more can be channeled into addiction service